Hey guys, Fox here, and today it is time to look back at the 2024 UFL season now that it's been about a couple weeks since the season ended, and we're going to be looking back at how good or bad was the TV ratings and attendance actually. Naturally, we're going to be comparing this to the ultra-modern spring football leagues of the USFL and XFL. I will briefly mention the XFL 2.0 and AAF, but those were, pre-COVID, a lot of different things, than today's day and age. So without further ado, let's get started with the attendance. The attendance was a failure for the UFL. Look, we've all talked about it, and it's not a hidden secret, right? I mean, everybody knows the attendance was a failure. The higher ups even admitted it, and it's a huge reason why at least all the reports and what Daryl Johnson himself has said is why they're going to stick with 8 teams is because the attendance was just that poor. Look, the only team that we know went up in attendance was Michigan, and that's if we are believing Mike Mitchell, which I think most people would agree is fair to do. But aside from that, pretty much every other team except maybe the Stallions all went down in attendance. The XFL teams we actually do have the announced attendance from, from the 3.0, whereas the USFL didn't, and they all went down. Yeah, San Antonio's average is over 14K. That is because of the fact that, they included the championship game, which had 27,000, but that was in St. Louis. Normally, San Antonio basically averaged about 12K. So they were down a couple thousand compared to the Brahmas in the XFL last year. The Defenders were also down a couple thousand, even if you get rid of the championship game for them as well. And then, aside from that, you have the Renegades went down a couple thousand. St. Louis, despite breaking the record for a single game, also went down a couple thousand. So you had Houston also dip a few thousand, not even a couple. They dipped about 5K. So all the XFL teams saw anywhere from a slight decrease to a massive decrease. With really DC being the one that was technically the best because they're actually again, the 16K has the home playoff games and all that and playoff games. In terms of regular season average, it actually was pretty close between DC. In fact, in terms of announced attendance, it really was, actually this season's DC was technically better when you account for the fact that yes, DC had that one, that sellout in week 9 and all that. But overall, DC this year had the 15K, the 16, 14, 12, and 13. DC last year, that was really the only good one. Every other team besides DC and Michigan were pretty much failures. Again, Birmingham maybe. And yes, the playoff games, they are what they are. The UFL championship had 27K in tickets sold. We know there was not even 17K people there. Then, of course, it's just overall attendance was a failure for this year. It was definitely a disappointment, and there's really nothing to sugarcoat it again. Look, we know the attendance for spring football has been going down, down, down. Look at the AAF. It was a super high amount. Then you had, the XFL 2.0 was still a good amount, but not as good as the AAF. Then the XFL 3.0, definitely starting to get worse and worse. And then now you have the UFL. This is despite certain franchises like the Battlehawks taking off. The fact is that you need to have a league of 8 teams having good attendance. Even the AAF didn't necessarily have 8 teams with good attendance, but you had enough that were hitting about 20K. The UFL needs to get this attendance problem fixed, and it looks like a lot of the higher-ups understand that. And we'll see how they work in 2025, but they really do need something to actually work for them. Again, DC's announced attendance was close to their attendance in XFL in 2023, but the in-person attendance was definitely not as good as the 2023 XFL. Then, of course, St. Louis, if they schedule it better, they'll probably break, their average from the XFL. Now, as for other teams, you don't know. The Brahmas, they had that huge home game in week 1 of the XFL, and then since then, they've never even come close to it. And that was despite the fact the team was really good. You would have expected them, having went from being absolute garbage to being a great team this past year, you would have expected to have games hit over 12,000 consistently. Instead, they had the week 1 game that hit 13K and then never again hit that mark. Whereas Michigan, at least, was able to rebound to hit 9,000 again. Memphis, Houston, a lot of things need to go right for them. So overall, in terms of attendance, huge failure, huge disappointment. We all knew that. And now as for the TV ratings, this is the good stuff. Look, the TV ratings were actually pretty solid. Okay, the top left is the XFL in 2023, top right is the UFL 2024, and the bottom left and bottom right are the USFL, left being 23, right being 22. When you look at it, the best way to view it is how does the UFL compete across the other leagues. Now, their ABC average was a 1.0 or 1 million. So it did hit 0.1 million less than the ABC did for the XFL. Now, ESPN hit a 0.8, which, fixes that issue because you had a 0.7 for ESPN, the year prior in the XFL. ESPN2, though, was a big disappointment. That was .2 last. Granted, it was only one game on ESPN2. And then you go to Fox with a .9. The Fox .9 was a really solid number. That actually matched the 2022 USFL number, which that number was heavily inflated by the opening night game between the Stallions and Generals that had 1.8 million on Fox. So really, it was better than what Fox put up in 2022. And then in 2023, it was better as well by .2, as Fox that year had a .7. FS1 again was an outright failure, but it's FS1. So overall, while we've always talked about the numbers being good, being great, and all that, reluctantly, it's not like they were unbelievable. If we're being fully honest, they were great, especially when you compared them in a week-to-week sense. If you went week-to-week direct against the other leagues, you saw a better proof of concept of how good the ratings were in a sense. But it's not like they were just this unbelievable, insanely good amount of ratings and all that. So it's one of those where it's kind of hard to say exactly what you want to view it as. Overall, though, it was a huge increase. The biggest one being the fact that the overall average per broadcast was a .9, so you were almost at 1 million per broadcast. Now, yes, was that heavily because of the amount of games on ABC and Fox? Yes, but we saw that with the 2023 USFL that had a bunch of games on broadcast which didn't work. And then, so when you see that, you realize that yes, the .9 was a really solid number to have. You had a huge amount of people that ended up watching the league and all that, and it was just a really solid number to have overall. Again, it's not like you can really get upset at what the league was able to pull off. Again, a .9 was huge. I mean, just look at the total amount of people that watched the league, and you'll realize just how incredible it really was, right? Your total was like 37 million compared to the 28 million you had in the 2023 XFL and 2023 USFL, or 2022 USFL. So the total people watched was much better. Comparing it week to week, yes, week 1 was worse than both the XFL and USFL in 2022, but then you get past it and you realize that the UFL's worst week performing in total viewership was 2.7 million. Every other league, or all these other seasons, had at least one, but really multiple weeks under 2. So the fact that the UFL was able to consistently keep higher ratings, again, I get it, they were on broadcast TV a lot. But the more you look into the deep dive numbers, the more you realize how good the UFL did at retaining viewership. That's another big deal. The XFL couldn't retain viewership to a huge degree. They had to have their numbers be bumped by broadcast networks. When you look at the last, 4 weeks of the season, yes, they were able to see some rebound after March Madness, but a lot of that was that you had ABC finally broadcasting games. The USFL, it was pretty much going down a little bit. So when you look at it that way, UFL did a pretty damn good job, especially because the playoffs were better overall. All 3 UFL playoff games hit over 1 million. Only the 2022 USFL were able to average that. And even then, they were averaging barely 1 million and then 1.2 million, whereas the UFL hit 1.1, 1.3, and 1.6 million. So for the postseason, the UFL did a really incredible job. So overall in TV ratings, I think that they were a very solid thing to have. Definitely really good. So that'll do it for this video. This has been Fox. If you enjoy this content, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified as soon as I upload any videos. I am doing a giveaway at 1,000 subscribers. Think about becoming a channel member for 99 cents a month to get an exclusive video, among other stuff. And as always, guys, have a great night.